What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are here with the first participation report of the week for the Lions and New England Patriots on the road, traveling to Bill Belichick. 1-3 teams facing off. Usually don't hear that with the Patriots. It just sounds weird. They played a tough game against Green Bay last week. They went to overtime, lost that game, and we don't even know who's playing quarterback for them this week. So let's get it started.
Fired up. It's made a great decision.
Great teammates, coaches, and other people who want to be Super Bowl champions. And we are. We're going to do it this year.
And we're going places because we want to go places.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to a video. Glad you guys are here. We're back with another one of these participation report looks for both teams. Both of these are relatively long. Dan Campbell said that he was going to have a lot of players on as they're kind of doing a rest day today, and New England is kind of doing the same thing, I guess, in terms of they have a lot of players on their participation report as well. We're also going to talk a little bit about this Patriots team, specifically I would say some of their defense, also a little bit of their offense as well. We'll touch on a few things that I've seen so far early into watching this team and who we're going up against, and also we just got to go through the roster and who we could be looking at playing in this game, because again, there are a lot of players, and specifically when you look at that quarterback position, that is the spot where last week we saw Brian Hoyer play. Mac Jones was out. He did not play with an ankle injury, so Brian Hoyer started, and then they went to Bailey Zappi pretty early in that game. I didn't realize he came in like early second quarter, and his stats didn't really have many stats from the game. The New England Patriots did a pretty good job of settling him in and not putting much on his shoulders. However, that game went down to it in overtime, so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Also, on the Detroit Lions side of things, we have a couple of players who are starting their clock today. Same thing with the Patriots. Actually, they have the player doing this as well, which is returning from IR to practice. It starts that 21-day period where you have this period of time where you can practice with the team, but you have to be activated within 21 days if you come back and practice off of IR. Of course, that's a 4-week window that you have to wait. If you get activated within those 3 weeks, you're good to go. If not, then you are out for the season. All right, so it's that way you can't just kind of hold players in there. So with that, we have a couple of players. Let's start with that first. This is awesome news. It was kind of expected with Jerry Jacobs, but it is the case. He is starting and returning back to practice today. Now, it didn't sound like, according to Dan Campbell, that maybe either of these guys will be playing this week, and it would probably be unlikely to see either of these guys play this week considering how long they have been without practicing. But according to Dan Campbell, we don't know at what rate because they're not going to put him on the injury report, but both Jerry Jacobs and Josh Paschal returned to practice today and started their clocks today, that 21-day period. So that's great. You would think at very latest after the bye week, these guys should be back, which is awesome. If they can come back this week, that's awesome too. Now, of course, the Josh Paschal, we hit on this one a little bit in yesterday's video on the defensive side of the ball. His ability to get pressure from the interior, I think, is going to be huge. It could also allow Lions to try to mix some things up alignment-wise because he had played defensive end at Kentucky. On pass downs, he usually kicks inside. Reminds me a lot of what John Kaminsky did for us. And John Kaminsky was huge for us, okay? The guy led the team in pressures when he went out with his wrist injury and had to have surgery. It was awesome for us. And I felt like the draft pick of Paschal, which happened before we brought in John Kaminsky, was going to be kind of that guy for us. And then we brought in Kaminsky, which I thought was going to kind of be the backup to that. Unfortunately, Paschal came in, didn't play. So I guess in the Lions' mind, they already had the plan that this was going to be the case. They already kind of knew this was going to be the case. So they brought in Kaminsky. He was big time for us. And now it could be Josh Paschal's opportunity, potentially depending on how long John Kaminsky's out, to step in and play a big role. But I think specifically in those sub packages, because right now we don't really have guys that we're going to on sub packages to get pressure from the interior. Sometimes we'll put Hutchinson in there, but of course when he's in there, you don't have him on the edge. We don't really have a lot of guys that we're putting in the inside. So getting a guy like Josh Paschal could be that. And of course, Jerry Jacobs, who we talked about yesterday much more, who is a guy that I think if he comes back and he's the Jerry Jacobs that we know that's healthy, he could compete for starting at cornerback position. I think the Lions are open to that. But it didn't sound like, according to Dan Campbell, that would be necessarily this week. However, when he was talking about and asked about the cornerback position, specifically Will Harris, he said he does expect Will Harris to play this week. He said, I expect a lot of guys to play this week. Not really sure what that means, maybe just to get a look at a lot of different players. But he said, I expect a lot of guys to play this week, but he does expect that Will Harris will be playing this week. And I think there definitely is a chance he may start at cornerback this week. I mean, I started thinking about this yesterday because I was like, okay, well, hold up. It's probably unlikely that Jerry would be able to play this week. So do the Lions consider going with Will Harris? If you remember, he played the entire game against the Washington Commanders. Of course, in that game, we had a lot of good defensively. It wasn't perfect. perfect, but we did do a lot of good. I thought he played a really solid game for us. Yes, he gave up a big completion in a coverage look defensively where I felt like, he didn't have the help of Tracy Walker, kind of put him on an island one-on-one, and he was beat deep. He wasn't in a bad spot, though. All right, he wasn't in a terrible spot. They tried to hit the trick play on him. He's very smart in the back end, passes off routes extremely fast. He's a very smart player in the back end that in the past has had trouble just making a play on the football, but he came up with an interception, his first interception of his career into that game off of a deflection. I think it's very possible that we see Will Harris start this week at cornerback in place of Amani to see how that goes. Also, understanding we're playing the Patriots, who don't really have a DK Metcalf. Now, they do have guys that can stretch the field, but it doesn't seem to be, at least on paper or for what I've seen so far from them, a guy that's that threatening where you really adjust their coverage to make sure that that guy's not going to beat you over top. The one guy that maybe could do that is Tyquan Thornton. So the perfect segue is that he has began his 21-day period of returning to practice. He began the season on IR, so we haven't seen Tyquan Thornton yet. If you remember, this is this extremely fast receiver out of Baylor, so if he does somehow play this week, then maybe that comes into play. So a lot going on there, but it is great news for the Lions side, having Paschal and Jerry Jacobs returning to practice. He also updated Jameson Williams, and he said Jameson Williams specifically these last 3 weeks has been coming along really well, but he doesn't anticipate that it's like super close, like right after the bye week. He thinks it could be a little ways after the bye week before we're thinking about bringing these guys back. So it's some kind of unfortunate news. I guess it is an update on Romeo, which we haven't really gotten, and same thing with Jameson, but it does sound promising with where Jameson is trending, and he could potentially end up playing this season at some point. Hopefully that is the case. But right now, I know a lot of us are just like, hold up, that's awesome. We want to see Jamel, but defensively, we got to figure that out. So that's really the focus with a lot of people, and that makes a ton of sense. So with that being the focus, let's take a look at this participation report for the Lions. We'll start with that side first. Obviously, there's a lot of names on this, and some of these kind of expected. Some of these you're like, oh, that's not good. But as he said, it was kind of a rest day, and a lot of players were going to pop up on this report. So it's through the week, which is important. So let's start with all the did not participate. There's a lot of those. First off, you have Chris Bohr with his knee injury. He was also on here, I believe, last week as well, did not participate to begin the week. So Chris Bohr is on here. We have started to see Derek Barnes mix in a little bit, and the Lions have been utilizing some of those 3 off-ball linebacker sets, but we've seen Derek Barnes utilized like Malcolm, going on the edge, things like that. So we'll keep an eye on it. If he can't go, of course, Derek Barnes will probably take in a little bit of a bigger role there, and he has started to get some reps, but I do like Chris Bohr, and I know when Chris Bohr is healthy, the Lions seem to like to use him in a lot of those third down packages. So we'll see if he can play. Evan Brown is also on here. I have him listed as guard. We know he's a center, but he played guard for us for I think the last couple of weeks. I know he did last week. I think the last couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken, played the right guard position, but he did get banged up into that game. We ended up having, who is also on this list, KO'd step in at a point later in that game. He seemed to struggle a little bit, but it was very late in the game, so it wasn't a very big sample size. He would probably be the next guy in if Evan Brown can't go. He's listed with an ankle injury, no participation. We'll see where that's at. Hopefully it's nothing too bad there because I would like to have him back. The good news is, and we'll kind of skip down a little bit, is that Jonah Jackson, who's been dealing with this finger injury for the last few weeks, has been do not participate, hasn't even given it a go. You can see today that he did give it a go. So even though it's kind of that rest day, they wanted to see where he was at, and they're not sure if he's going to play or not. No one seems to be sure, but as Jared Goff said, it'd be great to have him because he's a good player, and he's dealing with that finger, but he was limited today. So if he can return, of course, that could take Dan Skipper out of the lineup, and then you're looking at that right guard position. Maybe they move around Jonah Jackson. I would assume they would just put Jonah Jackson back at the left guard position, which he usually plays, and then it's the right guard position. Is Evan Brown healthy? Do they go with KO'd? Could Dan Skipper play right guard? I mean, do you even consider that? Who knows? But the more we get this offensive line back, the better. I mean, that's awesome. Hopefully that is the case. Quintez Cephas, he dealt with the injury about halfway through the game last week, and it came down to basically Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, and Tom Kennedy, who, by the way, Tom Kennedy has been signed to the Lions active roster. Congratulations, TK. Can we give a little clap for TK? That's awesome. Congrats. Still no participation today. We'll see where that's at. Of course, he had to play a bigger role last week because there was no DJ Chark, so we'll see where he's at. As you can see, it's no participation starting today with the ankle injury, and because of that, they also had to make Josh Reynolds basically play the X receiver position from the Z receiver position, which he has played up to this point, which could be the role of Jameson Williams when he comes back and he's healthy. So he had to slide right to that, and he didn't even notice it. He didn't even notice that he changed spots. He was awesome. I think he was like the highest graded receiver last week. Josh Reynolds killed it last week. He was awesome for us, as well as TJ, but he was great. So we'll keep an eye on that. John Kaminsky still in here with no participation. Again, he's still not hit IR. I believe this is 3 weeks in, so we'll see if that was the right decision. But either way, here he is, John Kaminsky, with no participation once again. TJ Hawkinson did not participate today with a hip injury. This was also, I believe, listed last week as well. He ended up playing, however. Frank Ragnow, no participation with a foot injury. We'll keep an eye on that one. Josh Reynolds, no participation with the ankle. I would assume most of these are just rest. Now, St. Brown, we know he didn't play last week, dealing with his ankle injury. Clearly, the Lions did a lot of creative things, but they also had to lean on other players. And I think one thing that did stand out at times are sometimes inability to get separation. I think that did stand out. And even when St. Brown was injured, I think it showed that he wasn't able to get the same type of separation. That's not to say St. Brown's some sort of burner or anything like that, but he gets in and out of breaks really quickly. And I think you saw that maybe sometimes in comparison to Tom Kennedy, who played well. He stepped up, but sometimes he wasn't always getting open. And that can happen, especially when you look at this Patriots defense who plays a lot of man. That's not to say they don't disguise coverage and things like that, but they play a lot of single high, they play a lot of man coverage, and they're going to make you beat them one-on-one a lot. And you saw the the Packers last week had struggles with that versus a team with some good defensive backs for sure. Of course, the rookie Jack Jones is killing it over there. They have some good defensive backs over there, and they put some pressure. Aaron Rodgers threw a pick six on an out route, I believe it was Christian Watson, where you guys are going to have to win some one-on-ones, especially if you start having the leading on the pass game, because they can slow down the run game, which hasn't really been the case for them this season. Regardless, though, getting St. Brown back could be huge this week if we can do it. Same thing with Chark, any of these guys, just to win some more matchups. Swift did not participate. According to Dan Campbell, he is feeling better. Now, the way that he said he's feeling better didn't seem the most optimistic, but he did say he's feeling better because he's listed with a shoulder and an ankle injury. Regardless, though, what Dan Campbell touched on, he said basically with everybody, including DJ Chark, who he hit on first, Josh Reynolds, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jonah, he said we'll see where he's at. Those three guys, Chark, Reynolds, and St. Brown, he said they're all feeling better. So they're listed with no participation, but he said they're in basically a better place. They're feeling better. So hopefully it's just that. Rest, there's no participation today. Now we have KO'd on here it says Hammett. Okay, I got to change that. KO'd on here, who did fill in at right guard for us. He's listed with a hamstring injury, limited participation. Taylor Decker, every time I see that, I kind of hold my breath like, oh no. Oh no. Well, limited today. We'll see. I hope he's all right, man. It's rest. It's rest, right? Okay. Knee injury. Jonah Jackson, we hit on him. Matt Nelson shows up in here with a calf, limited. And Austin Seibert. The news here is that the Detroit Lions have released the kicker. It's a couple of extra points last weekend. He kicked the ball out of bounds. He also made a 49-yard field goal, by the way. Ellerby, he has been released by the Detroit Lions, and they have went out and signed a kicker to their practice squad, a kicker that just played last week for the Chicago Bears. Now, I know what you're thinking, he probably stunk it up. No, Michael Badgley, who the Lions have signed, he's had more experience in the NFL. There's more to look at there, going back to 2018, where he was 15 of 16, 19 he was 13 of 16, 2020 he was 24 of 33. That's not the best, but specifically, in 2021 he was 18 of 22, but specifically this past week he was called up, flew in on Thursday for Chicago as Cairo Santos was not able to play for personal reasons. Flew in on Thursday, got there, kicked that week at MetLife Stadium, the Giants, and he was 4 for 4. Now, we know we're going on the road to Foxborough, all right? So that's something to keep in mind. It's an outdoor game. Last week he showed up, made all of his kicks. All the points for Chicago in that game were behind his leg. There were no extra point attempts. By the way, he is 122 for 127 on his career in the NFL for extra points. So just throwing that out there for anybody that might be interested after last week, okay? But with that, you could see 4 for 4 last week. His long was only a 40-yard attempt, but he did make them all. So Lions got a guy there that, did some good things last week. It's very recent memory, but it seems like they are hopeful and they're optimistic that Austin Seibert can get back this week, and him being listed with limited is probably a good sign, I would say, and he's only on the practice squad. He did not sign that kicker to the active roster, so I'd assume they'll wait up to the day. If he's able to play, great. If not, they'll elevate the kicker off the practice squad and they'll go from there, and he'll be the kicker this week. So hopefully we don't have to start doing this musical chairs thing, but we'll see. All right, so that's the Lions side. On to the Patriots side quickly. We have Lawrence Guy, the defensive lineman. Everybody knows Lawrence Guy, who's played about 50% of the snaps when he's been on the field this year. Dealing with a shoulder injury, did not participate. Brian Hoyer with the concussion did not participate. He was not spotted at practice today, so in his place last week when he went out, Bailey Zappi stepped in. And if you watch the Patriots offense, when Bailey Zappi stepped in, they literally did like everything they could to try to take all the stress off him they possibly could. We know Patricia's over there calling plays like it was either a draw, wide receiver screens, toss plays. I mean, it was a lot of easy stuff for Zappi. But what I did like about Bailey Zappi, and obviously coming out of college in that offensive air raid that they ran, that he followed the system, the system basically followed him throughout college, that he put up in record-setting numbers, is that he's a smart quarterback, like Dan Campbell said, and he's very calm and composed under pressure. He does not panic. He moves through calmly, and he finds a way to throw the ball away for the most part. But with that said, there wasn't much from what I've seen so far of that game that stands out to me. I think he only had like 9 completions in a pretty big sample size of the game that he played, but they did their best to try to not put too much on his plate. They did their best to do that. that, give him a lot of easy throws. So it's going to be interesting to see how that would go if he has to play again this week. They may expand it a little bit more than they did. He did get strip sack in that game, which has been kind of an Achilles heel, I guess, a little bit for the Patriots. They have turned it over 9 times. It's near the league lead. It was only, I think, 1 last week, and that was his strip sack. But they had 8 coming into that. Mac Jones has thrown 5 interceptions. And speaking of Mac Jones, you see him on here with limited participation. Bill Belichick touched on it a little bit today, saying that basically it'd be like a day-to-day thing. But for Mac Jones, they said he was out there and he was moving around better. And, of course, it's the ankle injury. So he may not be ruled out this week. He could end up playing. Now, if he can't play and they do go with Bailey Zappi, their backup will likely be Garrett Gilbert, who they have recently signed to their practice squad, who was with the Las Vegas Raiders. And, of course, there's that connection there within offenses of Josh McDaniels, who is with the New England Patriots. So that would be their backup, likely, if that's the case. But Mac Jones has not been ruled out. And again, Mac has had some struggles this year. 2 touchdowns to 5 picks. Basically has a 76 passer rating. Turnovers have been an issue. Fumbling the football. Missed assignments in pass protection. I think their right tackle, Isaiah Wynn, is absolutely beatable, especially when you have a speed rusher on him, and it seemed to have some problems at times last week. So keep an eye on that. DeMarcus Mitchell, defensive lineman, no participation with a concussion. Jonnu Smith, who is considered week to week. Ankle injury, did not participate. Kyle Duggar, he is a beast. We know this, but he is listed with limited participation. Raekwon McMillian, who is on here with limited participation. We saw last week, yes, Jelani Tavai was basically a starter for New England last week, and I don't think he played bad, but Jelani Tavai, and they got their linebackers, we know that can play inside, outside. They got these big bodies, so you saw Tavai out there. He was alongside Juwan Bentley. So we'll see, but we may see some Jelani Tavai this week, so everybody that's prepared for that. Jalen Mills, cornerback, dealing with his hamstring injury, limited participation. As I said, though, they have good corners, whether it's Jonathan Jones, who made some really good plays in man coverage, Jack Jones, who's been awesome. He had a pick 6 last week. They have good players in man coverage, specifically in that secondary, and that's kind of a staple of the Patriots, right? We know that. Adrian Phillips, he's basically been a starter this year. He's played 74% of the snaps last week, but he played 100% the week before. He's basically been a starter at safety for them. And then Isaiah Wynn, who I brought up. I don't even know who their backup tackle is, if I'm being honest. I think they signed some guys to their practice squad today, but I don't actually know who their backup tackle is. I probably should go check that out. Regardless, though, he's probably going to play. Still, Isaiah Wynn, I think he's beatable. I think he is. They don't have a bad offensive line. I don't think it's a bad offensive line. I really don't. I mean, they have Brown on the left side, and then in the interior, they got some good players, whether it's Andrews. Left guard, they got the rookie Cole Strange. At right guard, they have Onwenu. So I don't think it's a bad O-line, but I think Isaiah Wynn is the spot that you can potentially try to take advantage of a little bit. And yes, those are still some young guys on the inside there. And of course, knowing this Patriot style, as we know, this is a team that has struggled so far this season stopping the run, allowing 5.1 yards per carry. And I think that's probably going to be a very big key in this game with the coverage that New England can play in the back end. And of course, when it comes to passing downs, all of the different looks that they're going to give you. Yes, they will drop in the zone. We know they like to play man coverage. That's just something that they like to do. And they will blitz it from time to time. I know they're not always known as the most heavy blitzing team, but they will blitz. They'll break some 5-man rushes. And what's tough is they give you a lot of different front looks where sometimes they won't even put a guy, with his hand in the dirt. They'll have 4 guys, 5 guys standing up ready to pass rush. So they give you a lot of different looks, twists, stunts, which is going to put a lot of pressure on, say, if a Dan Skipper has to play. That struggled with some of that last week. You have another backup guard on the opposite side, regardless if it's Jonah Jackson plays. So that emphasizes Jonah Jackson playing, I think, for sure. But they're going to try to put stress on those players specifically with the games that they're going to run with their defensive front. Now, when you look at the Green Bay Packers, and I'll have to see more games, but it seemed like one of their approaches was to try to get outside. They did a lot of outside work, outside the tackle box, outside of this New England Patriots defense, and we know they usually have some bigger bodies, and they're one of these teams that still plays a zero tech. You don't see that a ton. They have a zero tech that'll go one-on-one with your center, which then, of course, you look at Frank Ragnow and say, okay, and they have some good interior defensive line players. Christian Barmore's in there. I don't think they have anybody that sticks out as super dominant, at least, and especially after what I've watched so far, but they have good depth. You have Wise in there who's done good things. I like Matthew Judon a lot, and because of that flexibility when they know, okay, of course, they put their off-ball linebackers on the edge, but specifically Matthew Judon, who kind of lives there, I like him a lot. If there's an impact player that stuck out to me instantly, it's him. His speed off the edge, his ability to also handle his own against the run. But Green Bay seemed to do a lot of things trying to stretch out the defense, get a lot of things to the outside, and that seemed to be how they kind of opened up their run game. But for the Lions, we know we run the ball really well, and we do it really well between the tackles. And if there's no Swift, there may even be more emphasis on that. So the Lions winning that run battle, I think, will be key in this game to keep the Patriots out of those situations situations where they could put, specifically if you have a couple backup guards in there, in some tough positions to react to on the fly. And then with their man coverage in the back end, if you're missing some weapons, now it's going to be a really tough matchup on paper, because now it's going to be difficult. Guys are going to have to win one-on-one. They're going to have to win one-on-one pretty quickly, because you could have some free rushers coming through. So there could be a really tough matchup there for the Lions, but if you run the ball well, I think it opens up everything off of that. And now all of a sudden this Patriots defense, who, as we know, they're going to try to take away your best player, I think we have a multitude of weapons, which is huge for us. So if we can run the ball and some of these weapons are here, I also think we could play this team really well. So I think this can really swing this type of matchups. Now, when you look at the Patriots offensive side of the ball, they're averaging 4.5 yards per carry, which is pretty good. They got two backs that I like. They got Damian Harris. They also have Ramondre Stevenson, who when he came out barely touched the ball, but now he's averaging 4.9 yards per carry this season. I like him a lot. We touched on the receiving core, which we'll see if Tyquan Thornton can play. It's not a bad receiving core. Nelson Aguilar, I like Kendrick Bourne a lot. You know, he's a nice playmaker. You also have Devontae Parker. It's not bad, but I don't know if there's that guy that threatens you consistently over the top, where you have to play like we did a little bit last week with DK Metcalf, and that's a battle that I'm going to be very interested to see. First off, does Will Harris get outside cornerback reps, number one, or if Jerry, if he's healthy, and number two, on top of that, how do the Lions play it schematically? Do they get a little bit more aggressive? Because if the Lions can get more aggressive, now it changes, I think, everything for the Lions defense, and that could start with some of the weapons on the outside, that matchup specifically, because again, this is an offense that's averaging 128 yards per game rushing the football, and I don't think we're terrible at stopping the run. I think a couple things. Number one, teams have got out and we've lost contain, and number two, we've had breakdowns schematically like last week, which really just broke the game wide open in terms of run defense. But interior movement, I think the Lions again can hold their own in this game. With that being said, I don't think the Patriots have a bad interior offensive line. Flip that side again, I think they have a pretty solid, tough, and good rotation in terms of that interior defensive line that they have defensively with some of their big bodies, where it can make it a little bit difficult in there. So if the Lions can win that battle up front, now it opens up a lot, and I'll have to go see other games, because I don't know how many teams can consistently win that battle. Again, we saw the Packers do a lot of things towards the edge, get outside on them, so that'll be interesting to watch. And I know we always talk about trenches, but this is another huge one like that, to kind of take some emphasis off of what Bill Belichick is going to throw at you, and then on the flip side, put more on the shoulders of a Bailey Zappi, force him to be a little bit more uncomfortable, make more decisions, and not being able to keep it kind of, you know, easy on him. And if you can get aggressive in the defensive backs, now some of those quick hitters, some of the screens they're trying to hit, things like that, you get a couple of negative plays, now all the emphasis goes on whoever is at quarterback. And it could be Mac Jones. We'll see. I don't know. I do feel like the Lions defensively, they can get some wins potentially on Isaiah Wynn here, and I don't know who's going to get that matchup. He's at right tackle. It may be more of Aiden Hutchinson. We'll see. But I think guys that can win with speed specifically could have some success in this game. But this is not going to be easy. This is a good, well-rounded team. Their roster is solid really across the board. I don't know how many players stand out to you, but they're solid across the board, and we know they're pretty disciplined. But the turnovers have really done them in. With 9 turnovers now up to this point, that has been an issue for them. So that's going to be a key in this one, absolutely. But we'll discuss this a little bit more as we go through the week. I'll leave it right there for now. Just some of my early thoughts from looking at this team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.